Okay, thank you, Michael. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Well, like he said, we're going to talk about safe computing during COVID-19. And as we get, well, there we go, get the slide to change. Okay. What we're going to cover today, we're going to talk about PII. What is it and why does it matter? Security basics, kind of the things you need to know to get started. We're going to talk about COVID-19 and 2020, the things that have changed for us. And then, as well as a few predictions for the future, where I think we're headed. And then I'm going to make some very specific recommendations about things that we should be doing to keep your housing authority safe. So we will jump right into it. PII, what is it? It's personally identifiable information. I'm sure most of you have heard of that term. Being in the housing world, that's something we should be aware of, but it's always good to have some reminders here. Some examples of PII would be your name, social security number, maybe the IP address of your workplace or your computer, the license plate of your car, your driver's license number, credit card number, date of birth, birthplace. There are lots of things that can be considered personally identifiable information. And I have included here some links to some good resources specifically around PII. HUD does require, you're supposed to be going through at least once a year training that's specific to handling PII. And a couple of these documents are from HUD, but the first one here I really, really like. They did a great job. Texas passed a very stringent law around protecting PII. And the Texas Municipal League, which is kind of the government group for Texas, they put together a really good training program. It's free. They have videos, they have handouts, booklets. You can even take a test and print off a certificate and stuff. It's very nice and it's free. It's probably the nicest one that I've seen that's a free training. So that is a good thing if you need training for your staff. That's a good, cheap, easy way to do that. And I had Michael put those into the group chat and also into the area for this session. So those are available for you to go get. So as we move into talking about PII, and we keep hearing about data breaches. That's in the news, on newspaper, on the TV. Keep hearing about these data breaches that happen everywhere. And well, invariably, I go to these conferences and I talk about that, talk about data breaches or security, which I've been doing for about 12 years now. I've been talking about these things. And I always get the comments that like, well, we're small or nobody cares about us or we really don't have anything that's that critical. But the public sector, which is what housing authorities would fall under, of the different data breaches, we make up about 13% of the total data breaches. And as you can see, when you compare that going across there, that's a lot higher than most other industries. So as a public agency, you are a target and you do get attacked whether you realize that you're getting attacked or not. I know one of my techs just had a conversation this week with someone that was talking about that exact same thing. We're little, we don't have much here, and nobody's going to come after us. But that's not reality. Reality is they're coming after you and you have very valuable information. One thing I was reading very recently about that said that we really should be treating this personally identifiable information like you had a stack of $100 bills sitting on your desk. you would want to protect this information that same way. You wouldn't leave a stack of $100 bills sitting out on your desk. And you certainly shouldn't be leaving this PII, whether it's laying around physically or whether it's more virtually on the computer side of things. We need to take care of it. As we move on to looking at the threats related to this, kind of break that down into the outside threats and inside threats, because they're both very real. And when we're talking about outside threats, we're talking about things like phishing, which you may have heard that term. We're going to talk about that more in a minute. Data breaches, which is what we've kind of been talking about already. And then ransomware. These are just some examples of things that are from the outside that are threatening the PII at your organization. As we look at the insider threats, we have things like accidental leaks. It's I accidentally sent an email with something in it that I shouldn't have. Or I sent a spreadsheet to somebody and I thought I had taken out the column with the social security numbers, but I forgot to. Those are examples of accidental leaks. Then we could have a malicious employee. And this is one we always tend to want to downplay, because most of us work in pretty small offices, and we know and like the people we work with, and we don't want to think that anybody would do anything bad. But in today's world, that's not necessarily true, especially given the nature of some of the people anymore with they're what we call activist type hackers, or people that they're on a mission to make your agency look bad. That's the whole reason they got hired, or they're in there for their agenda for some reason. The other thing, it could be a disgruntled person. I've seen this happen a couple of times where someone was passed over for a promotion or didn't get a raise when they felt like they should have gotten a raise. And the next thing you know, they're deleting files off the server, or they are making derogatory comments or passing along information that shouldn't be shared, or sometimes taking that and trying to use it for their own personal gain. So that stuff is very real. It does happen. And then, of course, we have the two probably more common. It's just simple lack of training or apathy. Just, I don't care. I don't think it's a problem, so I'm not even going to care about it. Those are very real problems for us when it comes to protecting personally identifiable information. So what happens when your PII gets out? So either you've been phished, you've been hacked, you accidentally sent stuff out. Well, most of the time, these things will eventually wind up on the dark web. And by the dark web, if we kind of think of the internet as a whole being kind of like a glacier, an iceberg, we see that little bitty piece that's above the water level, but below the water level, there's way more below the water level on these icebergs. And the surface web would be the part that's showing above the water line. And that's the stuff that we normally get to. That's the things that we can Google and get to. It's the normal stuff we think of as the internet. Then there's the deep web. And the deep web is really, it's just private networks. It's university research networks. It's private company networks. But it's connected to the internet in some way. And that, there's nothing wrong with that. And that is the majority, way more than the part that we see through Google. But then there's another subset below that that's called the dark web. And it's an area of the internet that requires special software to access. And it works on everybody being anonymous. And of course, that naturally creates an environment that criminals and hackers like that. Essentially, if you want to think of it, the dark web is the eBay of crime. Anything and everything is for sale there. Private information, credit card numbers, drugs, contract killing, human trafficking. It's anything and everything you can think of is for sale out there. We're specifically going to be talking about it from the standpoint of identity information, credit card, identity theft type stuff is the part we're going to be focusing on. So again, the dark web is just a subset where these hackers and organized crime groups hang out. And that is the thing. These hackers and the people that are doing this is big business. It is organized crime. This is the new mafia, the new mob. It is very organized and they go through a lot of money there. So people that might want to think that it's not real or something, but it is. We just don't really see it. Stat from one of the research reports last year, over 80% of Americans have some of their information for sale by criminals on the dark web. That's 8 out of 10 of us. I'm not sure how many are connected to this training right now, but the point being, it's most of you. I believe the stat now is somewhere above 14 billion pieces of personal information are now out there. Individual pieces of information that. And put that in perspective, we're at about 7.9 billion, I believe, people on the planet. So there's more information for sale than there are people alive right now. That's just staggering. And most people have multiple pieces of information. And of course, the more pieces that the bad guys can put together, the more that record is worth to them. One of the things that is very critical has to do with your passwords that are often stolen in these data breaches. And this statement here by the gentleman that's the chief information officer for Facebook says the reuse of passwords is the #1 cause of harm on the internet. And kind of the point that he's making there is people reuse their passwords. We all have way too many places that we have to log into. So it's just human nature. It's hard to remember all those passwords. So most people use about 3 to 4 passwords across about 30 accounts. So basically that says that about 1 password is used on about 10 different logins on average. So if they are able to get to you through maybe some small obscure website that they've hacked and gotten information from, if you've used that same password to log into your bank or to log into your retirement, they are now able to log into that. Or in this case, log into your Facebook page and take it over. And we all know that that's a very common thing, people taking over other people's Facebook pages. And that's how that happens. It's because people reuse passwords. Their password's been exposed in a data breach. And then I believe I'm going to have a slide here in a little while about that most people, after their password has been breached, they don't change it. Over half of the people, once they know their password has been breached, they still don't change it. And that's just laziness, is all that is. But again, it's human nature and it's what happens. Breaches are also more than just credentials. It can be the PII stuff we've been talking about. It can be financial information like credit cards, bank accounts, product lists, your healthcare information. We often don't think about the physical security side of things, building plans, security plans, security policies, travel itineraries. Those are also examples of information that's very specific to someone that can be used against them or to impersonate that person. And then, of course, there's legal information, contracts, confidential documents, things that you don't really want to be out in the public domain. So there's a lot of information. And of course, these things can all affect your, like things like your credit report and stuff like that, because if they've got a cross section of this information, it's easy for them to go apply for a loan or a credit card or something in your name, or in the name of one of your residents even, or employees. So hackers, they've already got this data. As I said earlier, 80% of the people have some of their information already for sale on the dark web. So the hackers are using that to turn around and attack you and attack other people that you know using your information. Things like identity theft, which would be the I'm pretending to be you for various reasons. Email account takeover. This is one we see all the time in the housing authority world, where somebody's email got hacked and now people are sending out emails that looks like it's coming from Sally, but it's really not coming from Sally. It's coming from some hacker in Korea or China or someplace that's sending out stuff pretending to be Sally, but you know Sally. So the normal thing is you tend to open emails when they come from her. Financial fraud, that goes back to the credit cards, loans, stuff like that. And then, of course, company data, being able to get insider information on your company or about your business, or to do some kind like a wire transfer or something like that. I tell a story about a company in Tulsa, Oklahoma, that a couple of years ago had this kind of stuff happen to them. It wasn't an employee, it was a contractor of theirs that's the pilot for their company jet. They were having the company plane taken in to be serviced. The CEO, CFO, everybody knew that the plane was going to be taken in for service. It was a fairly large expenditure. Everybody was expecting it. The pilot had had his email account hacked, and the bad guys were able to, they sent over an invoice asking for a wire transfer for the repairs on the plane. And it looked like it was coming from this airplane repair facility. Everybody was expecting this invoice. They paid it. They were out $80,000, I believe, is what they paid out on that. And yeah, it was a hacker. It was not the repair shop. But the hacker had just been waiting. He had had access to that email for quite a while and was just waiting for something like this to happen, waiting for the right moment where everyone would just assume that this was the correct thing, and they fell for it. And that's not that uncommon for those kind of things to happen now. Now, most of our housing authorities, we're not transferring $80,000 around from here to there, and we definitely don't have private jets, but the concepts are the same. It's still very easy to be tricked. And especially now, if we're working in a more remote setting where we're not all sitting in the office. If we were at the office and I got that email from Sally, I would have walked over to Sally's desk or picked up the phone and talked to her. But now, if we're all working from home potentially, or part of the office staff is working from home, it's not always as easy to communicate on those type of things. So this is an attack that various forms of this are happening more common now because everybody's so separated and working remotely. So it's just something to very much be aware of. And it always is a good idea to just pick up the phone and call the person that you believe is the one sending the email and just find out if it's real or not, especially when there's money involved. Data leakage. I mentioned that a moment ago. 83% of employees have accidentally exposed sensitive customer or business data at their organization. Well, that's a lot. Again, that's like 8 out of 10 of us have done that. We've sent an email accidentally that had some information in it that really shouldn't have been shared. It could be as simple as I'm typing, say, Sally at mycompany.com. And well, I hit Sally and it popped up the suggestion and I just hit it and it was really Sally at some other company.com. So it really didn't go to the Sally that I intended. So that's very common. It's a mistake, but it's something to be aware of, though. 5 causes of accidental data breaches: external email services. So maybe I have good corporate email, but I've sent a copy of something sensitive to my personal email, like my Gmail, my Yahoo, Southwest SWBC Global, Cox Mail, whatever. Send it to a personal email that has no, and those personal email accounts have no protection on them. So sending sensitive stuff to those kind of places, that's definitely a big no-no. Don't want to do that. Maybe I have corporate email, but it's not really protected. I've gone with a very cheap service where they're not doing, there's no encryption, there's no scanning for malicious activity. It's very easy anymore to actually put on an outbound filter that checks for things like social security numbers or credit cards in your emails, and it will stop it and give you a, hey, did you really mean to send this, before you send it out. Kind of gives you that extra little measure of peace of mind before it actually sends out, just to make sure you really intended to do that when sensitive information is detected. And then, of course, there's accidental leakage of information through file sharing services and collaboration tools, things like Dropbox, Slack, FTP sites. Even today, you could consider Zoom. You don't want to put a link into a Zoom chat box that has something sensitive or proprietary in it. That's just not a good idea. That stuff needs to stay through your normal communication methods, and something that is actually, if it's really sensitive, like social security numbers, it should be encrypted. And then, of course, there's text messaging type apps, things like GChat, WhatsApp, Apple Message, things like that. Those also not really appropriate for sharing sensitive information. And the thing to remember, even though data leakage is accidental, it's still a data breach. So that is something you need to be mindful of, that is that it is a breach, and now you've got information out there that shouldn't be. How do we combat data leakage? Well, we use encrypted email. We use outbound email scanning, like I said a moment ago. If we're doing file sharing or remote work, don't use USB flash drives to transport files back and forth. Those things are lost so easily, and anyone that finds it and picks it up has whatever files you've got on there. If you're going to be moving files between work and the house, and here I'm talking electronic files, it needs to be done securely and properly. I prefer to truly do remote work in a way where the file never actually leaves the office. That's the most secure way, because then hopefully your office network is very secure and you have the proper security measures there that you may not have at home. So if the files never actually leave the office, that's much more secure and it's a better way of working. As we move on, start to talk about phishing. Phishing is just simply tricking you into giving up important information. That's all it's about. They're phishing for information. And there's many types of phishing. We've all had the phone calls where they try to trick you into giving up some kind of information over the phone. And they actually have a term for that. It's called vishing or voice phishing. We have the in-person type things. Consider that the social engineering. They're trying to trick you into gaining access into your offices or something. There's the paper mail. It's the fraudulent mail that we get that's trying to trick you into giving up your credit card number or bank account information for various reasons. But the main thing we're focused on here is specifically talking about email, because that is the most common one today, especially when we start talking about data breaches and stuff. So what are they after? Well, it's that PII that we were talking about earlier. They want your email address, your username, your password, social security number, credit card, date of birth. The more pieces of information that they can put together, the more your record is worth to them when they're reselling it. And sometimes when they're asking for stuff, it can be seemingly very innocent, but then it starts to move more personal. Another thing to remember is that often today our email address is the thing that identifies us on most websites that we log into. So it's your email address and your password. If they've already know your email address, they've already got half the equation right there. And if you're using a really easy, simple password like most people do, they've got it. Or if your password's been exposed in a data breach, well, they've got your email address and your password. So they've got access to the things that you have access to. I quoted this one earlier. 57% of workers who get phished don't change their password behaviors. So over half of us, if we know that we fell for a phishing email, or we know that our information got leaked in a data breach, we don't go change our password, which is, it's just crazy. Put that in perspective, falling for a phishing scam is like giving a burglar the key to your house. Now, obviously, we're not going to do that. We're not going to go around giving the bad guys the keys to our house so they can come in and steal all our stuff. But that's exactly what we do when we're talking about our computers and our technology. We just said a moment ago, 57% of the people, after they've been phished or they've been breached, don't change their password. Well, the password is the key to the computer house. So you've essentially 57% of the people just gave their key away. We shouldn't make it that easy for the bad guys to take advantage of us. Avoiding phishing, it's some of the same stuff we were talking about earlier about protecting the PII. It's using good business quality email, not those personal accounts, not the free account from your internet provider, but actual business paid email accounts with proper spam filtering, antivirus filtering on the email, outbound security checking, a complete business email package. Also, your business email really should also be archiving email, a copy of all your emails also. That's just good. If you ever get into a situation where there's a lawsuit or something, that can really save your bacon if you've got that going to an archive. Then there's things like the email filtering I just alluded to. There's DNS filtering. Basically, that is making sure that the links that are in the emails are not going to someplace bad. And if they are, it won't let you go there. That's essentially what the DNS filtering is. Then there's just good old-fashioned employee training and testing. Whether it's the training like we talked about at the very beginning of this session on PII, or it could be more automated training. There are several services. We use one of those that we have available for our customers, where it can send out periodic videos to you about certain things and record whether or not you watched it. So you've got documented fact of whether you've trained your people or not. It also can do what they call phishing testing. So basically it sends out emails that are meant to be a phishing email just for the purpose of seeing if people will click on it. So you know who needs more training. But those things are a very good part of your arsenal for helping keep you safe. This is one I've been saying now for several years. Reading email is the most dangerous thing that you do. And I know that may sound a little bit over the top, but email is the #1 way that they're grabbing information from you through phishing. It's the #1 way that viruses and malware are delivered into your business today. So from that standpoint, email is the most dangerous thing that you do. And this is from a recent report looking at the different email delivered malware. And the things that came through, 35% of them had some type of a link to a site that would install malware on your computer. And if I add the two document ones together, that's about 44% of them contain some type of a document, a Word document, Excel file, PDF file that has some type of bad action in it that's going to harm your computer. It could delete information. It could put ransomware on your computer. It could install things on there to help them spy on you. And then there's 21% of emails contained an actual executable type file, which if you're on a good business quality email platform, these are the kind of things that can be filtered out automatically and stop them. That's always my thing, is if it doesn't land in your inbox, you don't have to worry about someone clicking on it or not. So if we can stop the junk from getting there to begin with, we're just that much better off. There was something else I was going to say there and I already forgot. Oh well, we'll move on. Some of the top phishing kind of categories and things, they're playing on your familiarity and your wanting to know. So you get a lot of things that are like deliveries, passwords, company policies, vacations, software, or it could be using a company name that you know, like, trust, you're aware of. Things like Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, UPS, IRS, Wells Fargo. They're trading on that idea of it's a psychological trigger. You want to open it because, well, I ordered something from Amazon, so I should be getting an email from Amazon. But, well, maybe it is, maybe it's not. And of course, there's the fear factor with like the IRS type of thing. They're trading on the fear side of things. So yeah, and often they put things in here too that will kind of make it seem like I really need to do it, like this password check required immediately. There's a sense of urgency there. I'm somehow going to get locked out or not be able to do something if I don't deal with this right now. That's, to me, urgency is one of the very key triggers to all of this to watch out for on phishing emails. If they're using I like to call it the used car salesman approach, where they're being really pushy about stuff, that's usually a pretty good sign it's not something you need to open. And then the same thing, like the order receipts, announcements, problem with your bank account. You have to be careful about those things. And if you're concerned about, say, your Amazon shipment, go to your Amazon account and look for the order there. Don't look for it in your email. Go directly to the source. That's the best way if you think you need to check on something. Is don't click on the stuff that's in the email, actually go to the actual source or what you think is the source. And then just here's some more common ones. There's like an Apple. You recently requested a password reset for your Apple ID, or a SharePoint. You have 2 new fax messages. DocuSign, that's actually been a more common one now, especially with the remote stuff. You've received a document that you need to sign, and you click on it, and well, it's really installing malware. So don't open those kind of things, especially if you're not expecting something like that. How to avoid phishing? The number one thing, pay attention. Just pay attention. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. If they're being too pushy and stuff, it's probably not real. So just pay attention. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the email filtering, that can be one of the biggest things to helping curb this. Is just stop that stuff from getting to your inbox to begin with. And then the training and awareness, and then keeping your computers and network secure. If you've got your computers and your network in really good shape, they can usually fight off a lot of this kind of stuff and stop some of these things. But they're still not foolproof. All these things need to kind of work together, kind of layers of security to keep you in the best shape. As we start to kind of transition out of that, if you think you can hide from the cyber criminals, well, think again. You can't really bury your head in the sand. You need to find out if your credentials are out there. You need to know what's going on, because you are a target whether you realize that you are or not. And it doesn't matter if you're in the teeny tiniest little town in Kansas and you only have 10 or 15 units at your housing authority, you are still a target. That's the thing. Everybody thinks I've got to be one of these great big agencies to be a target, but it doesn't matter. Actually, I think the smaller ones get hit a lot more than the larger ones do. It's just they don't realize that they've been hit. That's the problem. If we actually look back at some of the data and the research that's out there around this, they say most of the time, especially like with the ransomware and stuff, they've been inside your network and on your computers for an average of about 6 months before anybody even notices there's an issue. When most people are noticing the issue with ransomware type stuff, see, the ransomware is the final thing they're doing. That's when they're on their way out the door. They've already been there, looked around, stolen all the information that they cared to get their hands on. And at the point they've decided they're done with you, that's when they actually hit you with the ransomware. That's the way it typically works anymore. So again, they're usually in the network for a good 6 months, and they're not doing stuff that the average user would even notice, because they're not doing things that are going to drastically slow you down or behave in the way that we used to think of viruses behaving back in the old days, where it like locks up your computer and you can't hardly use your computer because it's off doing something weird. Most of this stuff anymore, they just lie in wait under the surface and try to not be noticed. Kind of stealthy in the way that they act. They've gotten really smart at it. That's the thing, is the criminals, you know, they're using, like when we're talking phishing, they're using psychology and advertising, gaming logic to trick you into giving information up. When it comes to the like these things where they're actually inside your network and have control of things, they figured out that, well, if they all of a sudden download all your files, they're going to get noticed, whether it's, you know, through many different things could cause them to be noticed. But if they just trickle that out over a period of months, you'll never even know that they were there, probably, especially if you don't have decent network and antivirus type security. And I'm talking decent, I'm talking the top of the line stuff, not the stuff you go buy at Walmart or Best Buy. The real security software is the only way that you're going to even spot these types of attacks. So I'm getting ready to move into talking about the scams. I don't know if I have the ability to open up and let you guys ask questions. Let me see if I can do that here, since Michael doesn't appear to be here at the moment.
We can unmute ourselves.
Okay, cool. Well, does anybody have any questions? Give my voice a rest for a moment.
You don't have any questions so far?
Okay, well, we will move into the next phase here. So we're going to talk about scams. So what is a scam? Well, kind of like the phishing thing. A scam is just trying to trick you into giving up money, information, or access. That's really what it's about. So phishing, like we were talking about earlier, was trying to trick us into giving up information. So phishing is a type of scam. But there are lots of other scams as well. And why scams work? Well, usually the ones that are really good at it, they make it seem real. Like the thing I talked about a while ago with the company that had their jet going in for service at the mechanic shop. They waited, they watched the email messages, and they knew that was a real event that everyone was expecting. And then they used that real event to take advantage of that company. Those are the kinds of things that make scams work. Often, scams have some truth, mixed with a lie. So they know a little bit of truth, but they don't know everything, but they can use that little bit of truth to pry more information out of you in a lot of cases. They prey on our fear. And then there's the you don't want to miss out. Again, it's that high pressure thing. It's the fear of missing out on something. And I'll use a good example here of a scam. This was a phone scam that my mother-in-law had. Of course, she figured it out part of the way into it, but it's a common one. She's got like 35 grandkids. So she gets a call and it's, Grandma, I'm in jail and I need bail money. Okay, she's got 35 grandkids. There's a chance somebody's in trouble. It sounds kind of like one of them, but they won't really tell her who they are, but they're preying on that whole grandma thing. And then they started with, well, it's your favorite. Yeah, so again, they've got just enough truth to mix in to make it sound right until they can pry more information out of you. Because they're wanting you to say, oh, is this Gabe? Or something like, give you something, then they can take that and use it. So it's that truth mixed with a lie is a very powerful thing when they're trying to get information out of us. Things to watch out for. If they're going to a lot of trouble to claim to be legitimate, a lot of times that means they're not legitimate. If they're really pushy, if they're threatening to you, or if it's too good to be true, those are all things that kind of point to it being a scam. And a lot of us have probably seen the stuff like where it's the threatening thing. Well, the IRS is going to come seize your home today if you don't go get a green card and money card and mail to us or whatever. That's kind of that example of the threatening thing, or the very pushy, well, you've got to do this. You just have to do this. Or the over the top, too good to be true thing. These are so, they're trying to appeal to your emotions to get you to do stuff. As I said earlier, they're using psychology. They're using the psychology of advertising and persuasion to try to get you convinced that they're who they say they are and that you should give them more information. A recent scam, and this one kind of uses a couple of different things. It's an email claiming to have your email address and your password. And they say if you don't pay them, in this case it was $5,000, they'll load pornographic images onto your Facebook account. This is one they actually call this sextortion, is the name of this particular type of scam. But it's a new twist on a couple of old scams. Basically, it's blackmail or extortion, and it's mixed with some data from a third-party data breach and some of that information that's gotten out there on the dark web, and now they're using it to try to blackmail you into doing something. And actually, this is an interesting twist that's been coming up this year from this, has to do with ransomware. Because a lot of people don't pay the ransom when they get hit with ransomware. So now what they've started doing is saying, if you don't pay the ransom, we're going to start, we also downloaded all your files. We're going to start releasing those files to these public file sharing places. So yeah, that's kind of another twist on that, kind of trying to blackmail you. So a partial truth in these things. They do have your email address and probably your password, because like we said earlier, most people, after they've been breached or phished, they don't change their password. So they probably really do have your email address and their password. but they may or may not actually have access to your Facebook or some of your other accounts like they're trying to tell you. So that's back to that partial truth type of a thing. But it is very dangerous. As I look at another version of this, I thought I had another slide there about this. I guess I removed that one. It was looking more at some of the current coronavirus type scams, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But you know, they're playing on your uncertainty, your fear, you're working remotely or alone. So it's the things like the fake information about coronavirus, how to stay safe or whatever, or statistics around the coronavirus, or like when we were having the really bad shortages for the protective equipment like masks or sanitizing stuff, you know, trying to sell you fake, you know, they just want to take your information, get your money and your information. They're not actually going to sell you anything. Those are some good examples of some current scams. So as we move on to actually talk about this year, threw in this slide. I know Michael was commenting on this one earlier. You know, can we uninstall 2020 and install it again? You know, this version has a virus. Just it's kind of a little bit of humor to throw in, especially with my geeky technical stuff here. But, you know, this is the year of COVID-19. It has affected every aspect of our work and personal lives. And it's been huge change for us. And it's, I think we're still struggling with how to get through those changes. Of course, one of the biggest things is just the protection level is, you know, how do we protect ourselves and the people around us? And it doesn't really matter if you subscribe to the should I wear a mask or not wear a mask, or should I be able to meet with whoever I want to meet with or not, or any of that. That really is kind of the beside the point, what your opinion is, because the reality is this is what we're living, and we're all going through it, whether we want to admit it or not. This is very real. And it has changed, and some things I think will probably change. We will never go completely back to where we were. And I think that has some definite implications for us on the technology side. And I can sum those things up really by two things: scams and working remotely. There's a whole bunch of issues, but I think they all come back to one of these two things as we look at them. Obviously, there are scams. There are lots of scams, and it could be selling you face mask or protective equipment, but not delivering it. It could be bad websites they're taking you to install malware or trick you into signing up or giving them more information. There are so many versions of that kind of stuff out there just because they know people have this high level of uncertainty around things right now. People are wanting information, they're wanting supplies, and it's easy for them to prey on people during these times. As we kind of move from that into our actual work day type of stuff, and one of the problems with working from home is that it can be really stressful. There's no separation of work and home. And no matter how well you manage it, there are distractions to that. And a lot of people, especially if you've got school-age kids, you're having to potentially be teacher, parent, the lunch person, and everything else at the same time you're trying to get your work done. And that can be stressful. Can be stressful for you, can be stressful for your kids, for your spouse. It can be difficult. And that makes it easy for us to fall prey to scams because you're busy and you don't have time to deal with something right now. So if somebody's being really pushy and demanding something from you right now, you might just go do it just to get rid of them because you're busy. So it makes it easier for you to fall prey to scams. It also creates some real technological issues as well. As we start talking about working from home and staying secure, we've got some definite challenges there. We see things like slow internet. A lot of times we don't have the same internet speed at home that we had at work. Especially as we get out in some of the more rural areas, that can be a huge problem. Also, maybe I have the same speed at home that I had at the office, but say there's an outage. Well, I call my cable company here in my case. Well, the first thing they're going to tell me is, oh, well, that's a home account. And well, we're not really actively working home internet issues right now because of COVID-19. So they don't even want to come fix my internet problem because I'm working from home. Now, if I was on a business account, we literally had this happen here, an outage here in our town. They were at our office fixing our internet at our office within an hour. It took them 2 weeks to get to my house to fix my internet at my house. So that's an issue, and it's something you don't even really think of, but it's something happening today. We also, as we're trying to work from home, we have a lot of new applications getting introduced into the mix. And this time last year, I would venture to guess that most of you were not using Zoom this time last year. That was not happening. I had heard of it, I had used it, but most people really hadn't. They were a fairly small player in the market this time last year. Now they're huge. That's an example of a new application that we're all now having to learn if you want to be able to interact with people. There are lots of other applications that people are trying out, and some of them are good applications, some of them are bad. As most of you probably heard, as Zoom really went through this major growth spurt earlier this year, there were a lot of bugs and security flaws uncovered. Now, I really had to applaud the way Zoom handled that. They were very transparent. They came out, said, yes, we have these problems, and they fixed them. They didn't try to sweep it under the rug like a lot of other companies have done. So I really liked that about them. But there are a lot of applications that people are trying out and trying to use as they're trying to figure out how to work remotely or work with part of their people remotely. You want to make sure you're getting applications that are secure and they're not some fly-by-night company, especially if it's going to have access to sensitive information about your tenants or your employees. You want to make sure you're using a reputable piece of software. Then we have the challenges like, is your home computer secure? Well, most likely it's not as secure as your office computer. Do you share your home computer with other people in your household? In most cases, the answer is yes, unless you have a dedicated work laptop that you can take home. then your home computer probably is shared with your spouse, with your kids or grandkids and things. Well, that brings up a lot of security issues when you start talking about working on sensitive information like you do for the housing authority. So we want to make sure that computer is secured and taken care of. The other side of it is, I'm pretty much guarantee your home network is not secure. Actually, most housing authority networks are not secure. When we go do our investigations that we do, checking out, doing network audits and assessments. Oops, my presentation just went away. Hang on. Okay, there it is. When we go do network assessments, most of the time, probably 90% of the time, most networks at these agencies are not properly set up or secured. And I know if I'm finding that, there is no prayer that your home network is secure or properly set up. So those are things to think about. When we have all these gadgets now connecting to our home networks, things like Wi-Fi thermostats and Amazon Alexa and maybe cameras or Ring doorbells and all these other gadgets, and all of those things are connecting through your internet connection. And if that stuff's not separated from the part of the network your computer's on, guess what? All of that stuff has access to your computer and to the data that's on your computer. A good example of this, I believe it was end of last year, Target was hacked. And you know how they got in? Was through their heat and air system. And Target even had it set up where the access to their heat and air system was supposed to be separated onto a different network than the part of the network where their cash registers and credit card machines are. But they were able to attack that heat and air system, and then they were able to make their way into the credit card system installed. And then from there, they managed to get back into the corporate information and get credit cards on millions of people that they were able to steal. And that was all because of that heat and air system. And that's at a large corporation. So think about your house. I know there's no way you've got that stuff properly secured and the traffic away from your computer traffic. So those are things to be concerned about. Also, many of the home network devices, the routers that you get like at Walmart or Best Buy, unless it has been bought within the last 6 months to a year, it has probably got major security flaws. Many of those low-end cheap routers from like D-Link, Netgear, some of those cheap low-end brands, Belkin, most of those had major flaws where people could actually take over your router and deliver viruses into your network through that router. Those were very common flaws, and most people don't update their network equipment at home. So these are definitely things to be thinking about as you talk about starting to work from home. And that's before we even get to the part about where are your files. Like I mentioned earlier, we want to make sure that the files that we're working on, it's really best if the actual files stay at the office and never leave the office network. That's the most secure place for them to be. Don't even transfer them to your home computer. Use a VPN connection into your office, or use remote control software to get to your office computer and work on it there. Those are the right ways to do it. And I know I was visiting with a lady earlier today during the exhibit time. And we were talking about that. She was talking about, she knew there were people that sometimes turned their VPN off. And if they could still get to some of their work stuff without having their VPN on, well, they might do that because it was faster or it was less of a hassle. But the problem is that you're putting your security as well as the housing authority security at risk. And remembering, you have files on all your applicants, on your tenants, on your employees, past and present. You have information on your vendors. You have a lot of information that you've been given care over, and you have a responsibility to take care of that. Kind of like I talked about earlier with that stack of $100 bills. You need to treat it like it's that kind of important. You need to take care of it. So those are just some examples of some of the potential challenges to working from home on the technical side. So let's talk about some work from home tools. It helps to have a dedicated workspace. You'll be a lot more productive if you'll actually set up a real dedicated workspace. It's like when we came home from the office earlier this year, and I thought, okay, I don't know if this thing's really going to last or not. So I just kind of worked out of the living room, sitting in the recliner with my laptop. And I got some work done, but I wasn't very productive. I finally had to make up my mind, okay, this is for real, and actually set up a real office environment in one of our spare bedroom so that I could work. And once I did that, it was like, oh my gosh, I was like 3 or 4 times more productive instantly. Just having a decent, dedicated workspace made a huge difference. And I knew that. I used to work from home for years before I started Ultimate IT Guys. I knew that I needed a workspace, but I didn't do it. But that's something you just need to bite the bullet and try to get you a decent dedicated spot to work from. You need a good computer. Again, if your computer is ancient and underpowered, you probably need to get a better computer if you're going to be working from home. And if your agency is not providing you a computer to work from home. Some of them are. I know some of the housing authorities we work with, they've used some of their CARES Act money to buy laptops so that they have the ability for some of their people to work from home if they need to. Some of them already had them for when they're having to travel for training previously, so they were already fairly well set up. But you need a decent computer, and it helps if it's dedicated and not shared with other people in your house. And that's another thing to remember. If you do have a computer provided by your housing authority that you're using to work from home, you definitely should not be allowing your kids to use it as a toy to play games and stuff on. That, what I've always said in the past in my training classes is treat your technology like it's a tool, not a toy. So you want to take care of your tools that you've purchased, you've made an investment in. So don't let the kids play on it if it's owned by the housing authority. You'll be in a lot better shape. The other thing, making sure you have the best internet connection that you can. Sometimes that's not always possible, especially in the very rural areas. You may not have very many options. So that may not be easy, but there are more and more options now, whether it's a remote, like a cellular hotspot kind of device, or some of the other newer internet type connections. There are more and more options for us out in the remote areas now than there used to be. Then there's the video conferencing and the chat apps. You need to have the apps to be able to communicate with people, because you can't just holler at the person in the next office or at the next cubicle like you could when you're in the office. you need to be able to communicate with each other. So whether it's video conferencing, chat, email, you need that communication in place. And that's also helps with people's just general stress and their anxiety. They say that being able to see each other like we can here in these Zoom calls and Zoom meetings is helpful to people, so you don't feel like you're so isolated and alone. It's good for you to be able to see other people. Then there's the secure connection to the office. That's either using a VPN type connection or using some type of a remote connection, which is our preferred way of doing it. The main thing is you want to be connected securely and not using some freebie thing that you downloaded from some website, or somebody at the coffee shop told you, hey, you should get this, super free access program. Yeah, those are the things to stay away from. Remember, most things, if it's free, that's the most expensive thing you'll ever buy usually, because there's always a cost, and free always comes with some other string attached. They're usually wanting information from you, or they're going to show ads, or they're going to do something. So it's not really truly free. So invest in proper software for that, for your connection. And then, of course, there's remote printing. That's another big issue. And then that brings up another big problem is if I'm printing stuff that's potentially sensitive, I probably need to be able to shred it if I'm at home. Or how do I limit access if I have kids or grandkids or spouse or whatever? I need to keep that stuff secured. They don't need to be seeing it. I don't need to leave it laying out on the kitchen table, a list of a bunch of people's social security numbers or their dates of birth or something. That's not, essentially, it is a data breach. You leaving that on your kitchen table, even though it's your spouse or your child seeing it, it's still technically a breach because someone had access to it that was not supposed to have access to it. That technically is a breach. So we need to be mindful of those things. So that's definitely something you want to think about if you're going to be printing stuff at the house. Probably want to be able to secure the documents, and you probably want to be able to shred the documents. And then also having good phone service. A lot of people don't have a home phone anymore. Most people have gone to just using their cell phone. And well, if you're in an area at your house, sometimes some houses, well, maybe I can get a cell signal at one end of the house, but not at the other end of the house. Well, if you're going to work from home long term, you might ought to get a cell phone booster for your house, or go to a different cell provider that has better, stronger signal where you live. Those are things you probably need to look at. Or maybe you need to get just a regular phone line at your house again. Again, if that's going to be your workplace now, you need to treat it like it's a workplace. So those are just some good examples of some tools that'll help make working from home a little easier. And I believe this is posted in a couple of different places on our social media and on our website. Some more things to consider here, and this is kind of meant to get back into hopefully some discussion here. Some other things we need to think about when we talk about remote work or just the world we're in today is a lot of us are having remote board meetings now. We're not having the traditional everybody come and sit in the conference room kind of meetings. So yeah, there's things to think about around that. What software are we using? How are we getting documents distributed to people? Are we using devices for them to get to? Then we have the communicating with our residents. A big part of that now can be our website, or place to put announcements, our agendas, our minutes. Michael's telling me I need to be wrapping up. So I am not going to open it up for discussion, but if you have thoughts around any of that stuff, I would love to hear it. If you'll just drop me an email about it, C. Davis at Ultimate IT Guys. So let's start our prediction. Work's going to be different. We're going to have bigger penalties for PII and data breaches. We've already seen Texas and Louisiana, California, New York have all passed new laws around data breaches and PII. And that's something I would always get in class before. People talk about, well, no housing authority's ever had to pay a penalty and they don't ever cut our money. So I don't care if anything happens. Why should I care if they're not going to penalize me? Well, first of all, we have an ethical and a moral obligation to protect information. But the reality is the penalties are coming. We're starting to see some really large penalties get handed out now to companies. And I would venture a guess we will start to see HUD cut funding to agencies that have had breaches and repeated PII type of incidents. That is going to happen. Maybe not in the next 6 months or a year, but it is. And then, of course, the hackers are going to continue to attack us in new and creative ways. As we start talking about fighting back, and I will put out a PDF of this and make it available to everybody because I've got a whole list of things here. But our basics, it's antivirus, backup, and updates. Used to, a few years ago, you would be reasonably safe if you just did those 3 things. But that's not the reality anymore. We need to find out if our information's on the dark web and then take action to minimize our risk. We need to use better passwords. We shouldn't reuse our passwords. You should use a password manager so you can use unique passwords. You got to have something to keep track of that for you. Really need to be using multi-factor authentication. That's the stuff where it's like sending you the code to your cell phone or something after you've put in your username and password. That's just a third thing, and that makes it much more secure than just a username and password alone. Need to be using proper business class email that's got the scanning and the archiving and stuff that I talked about earlier. Need to be using encrypted email if we're sending any kind of sensitive information. Need to be using modern antivirus and not the stuff they sell at Walmart or Best Buy. I'm talking about proper business antivirus. You need to always have a good backup. And the backup really needs to be ideally an on-site and an off-site backup. You need to have it in more than one place. That's the best way. You need to keep your computer updated. You need to keep your computer clean. Don't store data unless you really need it. I see all the time people keeping stuff from 10, 15 years ago that they're never going to need, but they're still storing it. And that just increases the amount of data that can be breached if something happens to them. You need to train your employees. Security training, phishing simulations like I alluded to earlier. You need to be secure when you're working remotely. Don't use free Wi-Fi. Don't use USB sticks for file sharing. You need to be using secure remote software. You need to secure your network. You need to use proper network equipment that's configured correctly. If you're using guest Wi-Fi on your network, which you really should be, you should not be able to access your office network from your guest Wi-Fi. 90% of the places we go into doing security assessments, that is not the case. That is configured wrong, which means the people you let on your guest network can get to everything on your computers. That's really, really bad. And 90% of the places we go into, that's not set correctly. Manage detection and response. The reality of today is stuff is going to get by antivirus for one reason or another. And it's usually because you let it. You told it was okay to do it. Having a managed detection and response type setup that's looking for actively looking for problems that you can go respond to and fix in, like I said earlier, the bad guys are usually in your network for 6 months before you even notice there's a problem. This is how you counteract that. Vulnerability and risk assessments. Knowing what your potential problems are and what the risk is for those problems so you can prioritize taking care of them. You have to remember security is a moving target. It's always changing. There's no, I just go do this and I'm done. That's not the way security works. It's always moving. And then just the good old fashioned pay attention. Like I said earlier, that will do a lot. And then my last tip is if you're not sure about something, you're unclear, you're not quite sure, ask somebody. That's the thing. Whether it's you call us or you ask a coworker, there's always somebody. Just getting another set of eyes to look at it's a better idea. That helps you stay safe. And then just our quick wrap up. We can help you with all these things. We have our service plan where we do preventative maintenance, antivirus backup, remote support, business email, dark web monitoring, network protection, all that stuff. We can help you out with all these things. And then the last thing in there, I did mention a moment ago, websites. That is one we've been getting a lot of requests for this year because of people having virtual board meetings. That's a good way to get your agendas and stuff out to the public is through a website. We have a good housing authority website type deal that we have created. We can get that up and going for you fairly quickly and at a relatively reasonable cost for that. So if that's something you need help with, we'll be glad to help you out with that as well as helping you with your computers. And that will wrap it up for today.